Now, from Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome to the World Over Live. We've got a big show for you tonight. With the Democratic National Convention wrapping in Charlotte this week, we'll get reaction from a pro-life Catholic Democrat. He's the co-chair of Catholics for Obama and associate professor at Catholic University of America. Stephen Schneck is here. We'll ask him how welcome he feels in a party so committed to abortion rights, and he'll take your questions. And later, Bishop Robert Morlino of Madison, Wisconsin, GOP VP candidate Paul Ryan's bishop, will join us to talk about the proper place of faith in the public square. Faith expressed by politicians as well as religious during this political season. If you have a question, give us a ring, 1-800-221-9460 in the U.S. and internationally 205-271-2980, or drop us an email at worldover@ewtn.com. Much ahead, but first, here's the brief news from the world over this week. Police in Northern Ireland clashed with Protestants in Belfast this week after violence erupted on Sunday night over a parade by Irish Republican Catholics. As many as 60 police officers were injured in what eventually became 3 nights of rioting. According to reports, Protestant British loyalists became upset when Irish Republicans paraded near Protestant districts in northern Belfast. Both Republicans and Loyalists parades regularly during the summer months. Rioters threw bricks, golf balls, and fireworks at police lines. Most of those hurt suffered only cuts and bruises, while 4 were hospitalized with more serious injuries. Deputy First Minister Martin McGuinness said the riots are a result of a terrible display of bigotry and sectarianism. He and First Minister Peter Robinson met on Wednesday to discuss parading disputes. And more Christian leaders are weighing in on the worsening crisis for Christians in Syria and throughout the Middle East. At a meeting of top Orthodox prelates in the region, Archbishop Chrysostomos of Cyprus said Christians in the Middle East and Syria in particular are in danger if Muslim extremists prevail. Orthodox leaders also warn of increasing numbers of citizens leaving Syria. In addition to the thousands of Christians who have fled for Lebanon, approximately 20,000 refugees have gone to camps in Jordan. Meanwhile, the head of the Syriac Catholic Church is calling out the European Union for not really caring about the fate of Christians in the region. In an interview with Aid to the Church in Need, Patriarch Ephraim Joseph III charged that if the EU truly cared, it would, quote, advocate for equality and human rights for all, including those in countries where the so-called Arab Spring has not taken place, end quote. And the construction of the largest Roman Catholic church in Arabia and the Gulf is being met with protest. Hardline Sunni clerics in Bahrain are strongly opposing the construction of a church complex in a rare, open challenge of the country's Sunni king. More than 70 clerics signed a petition this past week saying it was forbidden to build churches in the Arabian Peninsula, the birthplace of Islam. One prominent imam proclaimed in a sermon that there was no justification for building further churches in Bahrain, adding, anyone who believes that a church is a true place of worship is someone who has broken their faith in God. The church project is part of an effort by the Vatican to create a new apostolic district covering Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. It will serve as the administrative headquarters for the Catholic Church in the region. And after an extraordinary turn of events in Pakistan, a girl charged with blasphemy for allegedly burning the Quran is set to be released. This after testimony that the girl was framed by a Muslim cleric. Imam Khalid Krishti was arrested and charged with blasphemy for inserting pages of the Quran into a bag that the girl would later burn. The girl charged is illiterate and suffers from Down syndrome. Prosecutors say Krishti told a witness that planting the Quran pages with the girl was a way of, quote, getting rid of Christians. The girl's family has been in protective custody since her arrest after receiving numerous death threats. Hundreds of their Christian neighbors have fled their Islamabad homes as well. And Franciscan friar Father Benedict Groeschel has stepped down as host of EWTN's Sunday Night Prime in the wake of recent comments he made regarding the sexual abuse of minors. In a recent interview published by the National Catholic Register, owned by EWTN, Father Groeschel suggested that in some cases of sexual abuse, the minor is, quote, the seducer, and that he's inclined to think that the first-time abusers should not go to jail because their intention was not committing a crime. Father Groeschel has since apologized for his remarks, saying, quote, my mind and my way of expressing myself are not as clear as they used to be. He further clarified that those who abuse minors are always wrong and always responsible. In a statement, EWTN president and publisher of the National Catholic Register, Michael Warsaw, said, quote, it should have been obvious to the editor that Father Benedict's physical condition and mental clarity have deteriorated, and that the comments were completely inconsistent with his life's work and witness. We apologize that those remarks were published and ask for forgiveness for this error, end quote. Please keep Father Benedict in your prayers. And Cardinal Carlo Maria Martini, the retired Archbishop of Milan and biblical scholar, was laid to rest this week. He passed away last Friday at the age of 85 from complications resulting from Parkinson's disease. Cardinal Martini was for years the leading liberal thinker in the College of Cardinals and considered a possible successor to Pope John Paul II. He frequently voiced an openness to dissent on church issues such as condom use to fight HIV/AIDS, priestly celibacy, and homosexuality. Ordained a priest of the Society of Jesus in 1952, Cardinal Martini served as Archbishop of Milan from 1980 until 2002. May Cardinal Martini rest in peace. And some sad news from Mother Angelica's community. Sister Mary Frances Charbel, a Poor Clare of Perpetual Adoration, died on Wednesday at Our Lady of the Angels Monastery in Huntsville, Alabama. She passed away peacefully after suffering from a brain tumor for several months. Born Maureen Ackers in Chattanooga, Tennessee in 1946, Sister Charbel was one of the first nuns to join Mother Angelica's order at Our Lady of the Angels in 1976. She was a dear sister. She suffered for a long time. Please remember Sister Charbel and the nuns in your prayers. And Pope Benedict's already green pontificate just got a little bit greener. The 85-year-old pontiff is now the owner of a customized electric-powered automobile, a Renault Kangoo, not a kangaroo, a Kangoo. Benedict has been dubbed the Green Pope for his environmental stewardship, which has become a hallmark of his papacy. Under his watch, the Vatican has installed solar panels on top of Paul VI Hall and joined a reforestation project to offset the Vatican's carbon footprint. After being presented with the keys to the vehicle on Wednesday, the Pope went for a cruise from the helipad at Castel Gandolfo through the gardens back to his palazzo. The car will remain at Castel Gandolfo for occasional jaunts around the papal summer residence. Though the Holy Father's Renault is white and carries the papal seal on its doors, it will not replace the Pope-mobile. There's no open deck. You can't wave at people from there. When we return, the Democratic National Convention was in Charlotte, North Carolina this week. The so-called war on women and abortion rights were front and center in the party platform. A pro-life Democrat who's supporting President Obama will react and take your questions. Catholic University of America professor Stephen Schneck joins us when The World Over Live continues. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over Live. The Democratic National Convention rolled into Charlotte, North Carolina this week. Surprisingly, the party featured hot-button social issues like same-sex marriage, abortion rights, and even struck God from the party platform before putting him back in. Is there room for pro-life Democrats in the Democratic Party? Joining me on set is a board member of Democrats for Life and co-chair of Catholics for Obama and Catholic University professor Dr. Stephen Schneck. Thanks for being here, Professor.
Really delighted, Raymond.
Let's start with, I was at the Democrat for Life event you all had this week in North Carolina. It was the thing that I guess was most shocking. Sure. There were no office holders on the panel. You had Bart Stupak and you had Kathy Dahlkemper. Two people who lost their seats last time. What does that tell us about the openness of the party to pro-life Democrats?
Well, one of the things that you saw was that both Kathy Dahlkemper and Bart Stupak, former congressmen, are on the board of Democrats for Life, and we wanted to feature them for that reason, I have to say. But of course there are strong pro-life Democrats as well. I can think, for example, of Marcy Kaptur, someone that we're often approached for these kinds of things. But we really wanted to put our board members up there front, and we also wanted to make a particular point, and that is the point that I think it's a critical point to think about. For the Democrats to really get back in power, to win Congress back, we think they need to be featuring pro-life people like Kathy Dahlkemper and Bart Stupak, because it was the defeat of Kathy Dahlkemper and Bart Stupak and about 10 other pro-life Democrats that brought the Republicans into power in the House.
Now, I want to play a little video for people.
Oh, sure.
There's not a lot of news at these political conventions, let's face it, but this was real news. On Wednesday, party leaders forced a delegate vote to reinstate the platform's only reference to God and a declaration affirming Israel, or Jerusalem rather, as the capital of Israel. Earlier in the week, delegates approved the platform without the God and Jerusalem references. Here's Convention Chairman, LA Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa. He sought a 2/3 vote of the delegates assembled. Watch what happened.
Hearing none, the matter requires a 2/3 vote in the affirmative. All those delegates in favor say aye. All those delegates opposed, say no. In the opinion of the... Let me do that again. All of those delegates in favor say aye. All those delegates opposed, say no. I guess...
them do what they're going to do.
I'll do that one more time. All those delegates in favor say aye. All those delegates opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 have voted in the affirmative. The motion is adopted, and the platform has been amended as shown on the screen.
That was 3 times, 3 votes they had. People watch that, particularly Catholics, people of faith, and they go, they're pushing God out of the party. They're only bringing it back in because of the political reality. What do you say as a supporter of the party and this president?
I actually, I read the platform and didn't notice that God wasn't mentioned myself. And if anybody, National Catholic co-chair for Obama, I should be one of the people that noticed it. These things, as I characterize it, as just a ridiculous happenstance. I mean, there's absolutely stupid for God not to be mentioned in this document, and it was the personal insistence of President Obama that finally brought it
but you even
to the
heard
floor
in
and
that vote, there seemed to be, even in the vote 3 times. The no's, I was in the room when this was going on. The no's outweighed the yeses, obviously. There wasn't 2/3.
As was I. However, we have to remember that the issue of Jerusalem being the capital of Israel was on that ballot as well, and it's very difficult to sort all of these things out. What these
Let's talk about another provision of the Democratic Party platform, something that causes a lot of Catholics to sort of pause and look closely at this, and I want your reaction. The Democratic Committee platform states the Democratic Party strongly and unequivocally supports Roe v. Wade and a woman's right to make decisions regarding her pregnancy, including a safe and legal abortion regardless of ability to pay. How do you square support of that platform with your professed identity as a Catholic?
I in fact, don't. I mean, that is a part of the platform that I completely reject, as do, in fact, the entire organization that I'm associated with, Democrats for Life. And we worked very hard, in fact, to offer alternative language, to that particular piece. So this is, part of the platform that I have a great deal of difficulty with.
What do you say to
More
those?
than a great deal of difficulty. In fact, I absolutely loathe.
But what do you say to those who say this, along with the redefinition of marriage, which this platform also calls for, that those are deal breakers for any serious Catholic?
I think we have to look at the whole picture. One of the things that's motivating me in particular in regards to my support for Obama is the other side. And if I could be very specific, I'm particularly concerned about the 40% cut to Medicaid that the Romney-Riot budget proposal, would demand. Right now in America, 1/3 of all of the births in the United States are paid for by Medicaid. And in fact, if I could add a little bit more, 60% of all of our elderly citizens in nursing home receive their care through Medicaid. If we cut Medicaid by 1/3, I think it raises by 40%, I think it raises, really critical pro-life issues, and that really motivates me. And there are many other things about this as well.
No, the point has to be brought up. In one case, we're talking about what the bishops have defined as intrinsic evils.
And I agree, it's intrinsic evil.
People who aren't Catholic can just brush that off. But for serious Catholics, they've defined these things, abortion, same-sex marriage, euthanasia, as intrinsic evils.
We must oppose them. We always must oppose them. And,
okay, so why are we bringing up rates of reduction in a budget and putting that on the same moral plane? That's not on the same moral plane, is it?
Because, in fact, it's my estimation that if in fact, the Medicaid is cut by 40%, then we're going to see abortion rates in the United States skyrocket.
But that's the rate of increase being cut by 40%.
That's
not cutting into 40% of the overall budget. That's the rate of
those
projected
are real
increase.
Unborn lives that we're talking about here. And so, while I very much loathe this particular part of the Democratic platform and utterly oppose it, nevertheless, I'm convinced that the larger package of policies that's proposed are policies that are at least going to keep the abortion rates.
So I want to follow
stable.
your logic here. You're suggesting that the cuts and reductions in entitlement programs lead to abortion and poverty leads to abortion, yes?
What we know is that below the poverty line, abortion rates are 300% higher than above the poverty line. And if we look around the globe at countries like Germany and the Netherlands, they have very thick support programs for pregnancy, for the poor, for adoption, and their abortion rates are 1/3 what it is in the United States. And here in the United States, Romney Care in Massachusetts, which provides the kind of support that we're supposed to be getting from the Affordable Care Act, from Obamacare, Romney Care has already reduced abortions among teenagers in Massachusetts by 21%. And it seems to me those are important numbers to think about, especially because I'm not convinced that if the Republicans come back into power, that we're going to see any significant changes in the availability of abortion on demand in this country.
Okay, Dr. Schneck, I just want to follow the logic because I read a lot of your writings.
Thank you so much.
Particularly about this notion of as poverty increases, so do abortions, and if that's the concern, your argument is that Barack Obama presents a better alternative. Just looking at the record, you've got $16 trillion deficit now. We just passed this week.
Really?
You've got 46.7 million people on food stamps. By 2016, the Congressional Budget Office today said health care expenditures will surpass all the other entitlement programs because of the access to health care plan that the president passed. Won't that lead to more poverty and the same end that you're describing?
I think that what we're talking about is something in the area of prudence. That is, we have to make prudential decisions about this, and it's very difficult to guess. I mean, if in fact, the Republican economic plan really ushers in a new golden age of America and poverty disappears, then it would be very good for abortion. That it would drive abortion rates even lower, and that might be something for us to support. I'm just not convinced, and in particular, I'm looking at something very specifically, not poverty generally. I'm looking at the cuts to Medicaid. If 1/3 of the births in America are paid for by Medicaid, and we cut Medicaid, let's face it, newborns cost a lot, pregnancies cost a lot, young children cost a lot, abortions don't cost much at all. What we would see with that cut would be, a likely rise in the abortion rates, and a 1 or 2 or 3, whatever the percentage is.
Aren't we ignoring the Mexico City policy, which forbids foreign funds, sending funds to foreign governments and foreign organizations?
I absolutely oppose what Obama did in regards to the Mexico City policy.
Okay, but then you've also got Planned Parenthood, and I want to show you these 2 bites and get your reaction.
Absolutely.
I mean, these seem to be core parts of the Obama record that point directly to support of abortion, which, as you say, is a non-starter. I want to show these 2 bites. This is the president of NARAL, president of Planned Parenthood, who spoke at the Democratic Convention this week. Look.
I am proud to say that the Democratic Party believes that women have the right to choose a safe, legal abortion with dignity and with privacy. We believe in family planning because it helps to prevent unintended pregnancy.
So why are we having to fight in 2012 against politicians who want to end access to birth control? It's like we woke up on a bad episode of Mad Men. Because when Mitt Romney says he'll get rid of Planned Parenthood and turn the clock back on a century of progress, it has real consequences for the 3 million patients who depend on Planned Parenthood each year.
As a pro-life Catholic, do you consider this an appropriate expenditure of federal funds on Planned Parenthood, $363 million?
I would defund Planned Parenthood as well. And, it's unfortunate to me that, that Nancy Keane and NARAL have such a prominent place in the Democratic Party. And so I would encourage your listeners out there to really think about supporting groups like Democrats for Life within the Democratic Party. About 1/3 of Democrats currently in the United States are pro-life. We need to get organized. I think the way forward for pro-life concerns here in the United States is to build a strong pro-life presence within the Democratic Party, and we just need to recognize that it will take a 2-party solution to solve the problem of abortion long-term.
Doctor, I've always said if the Democratic Party was a pro-life party, it would take this issue completely off the table, and then we could have a serious discussion about so many other issues. But the fact is,
you and I agree completely. If the Democratic Party,
we don't agree completely because this platform allows no room for anyone who's pro-life. It is so definitive. It says it supports a safe and legal abortion regardless of ability to pay, same-sex marriage. You've got and
as I said, Raymond, I disagree with that. What I'm saying is let's wake up.
You disagree with so much here. No. Why are you still a member of this party?
Because I just pointed out that the current policies being proposed by Romney and Ryan are policies that I think would actually drive the abortion rate up.
By cutting a rate of increase on a given program.
If a third of the births, it's a third of the births in the United States, Raymond. It's not insignificant.
How do you pay for this? When we have exploding entitlements, the president has put forward no plan at this point. How would you pay for these entitlements?
I think we need to look at the budget a little bit more rationally and think about what's working and what isn't working, make cuts, if necessary, reach for new revenues. But, that's not my strength. All right, I'm not really here to argue about the budget. I'm here to make the moral argument that we can't endorse policies that are going to actually increase the number of abortions in the United States.
But revisit your argument just one more time, because I think people are having a hard time, because I am.
I know. It's such an unusual way to think. I understand.
But you're suggesting on the one hand that these budget policy decisions directly affect abortion.
And they do.
But we're to ignore the Mexico City policy. We're to ignore the spending that just went to local Planned Parenthood clinics when states cut the funding. The federal government and the HHS stepped in. We're ignoring the HHS mandate, which commands every employer, including Catholic institutions, to provide contraceptives, abortion-inducing drugs, and sterilization services to their employees. Those are good things in your estimation?
No. As you know, if you've looked at my record, you know that I have problems with HHS contraception mandate as well. No, I mean, my focus here in this discussion is literally on the cuts that are being proposed to Medicaid. And whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, you should be worried about those cuts because of the implications that they've got for the abortion rate. if we can bring compassionate conservatives back to the Republican Party and strip that out of the proposed changes, from Romney-Ryan, I think that's something that Catholics can rally around. But currently, I look at this and I see a rising abortion rate, and at least under Obama, I don't see that. And there's so much else about Obama's record. Once we get away from the life issues, that I am comfortable supporting his foreign policy, his economic policy, and
but
so
his
forth.
foreign policy includes the Mexico City policy, which is
Well,
federal
except
funds
for the
going,
Mexico City policy. Fair enough. All right.
Yeah.
Fair
Let's move on. And I want to talk about Supreme Court picks. The two Supreme Court picks of the president are pro-choice women who support many of the things the Catholic
Right.
Church considers intrinsically evil. So there's so many questions here and so many fronts, and I know you disagree with the president on those. So how can you?
And we can talk about that. And we can talk about that
Catholics
too.
for Obama?
All right, maybe let's think about the facts. I mean, the Republicans have controlled all three branches of government on several occasions since Roe v. Wade, and yet we still have abortion on demand in the United States. I'm not convinced that Romney's serious about changing that. And, we've had, remarks from members of his own family that suggest that he's not serious about that. So what I look at is the Romney-Ryan budget and its plans for cutting Medicaid by 40%. And I'm thinking, gee, if I'm really a pro-life voter, what do those cuts mean?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Whether you agree with me or disagree with me,
40% number, I'm a little.
it's analysis.
I've actually read the budgets and the Ryan plan as well as the Romney plan,
Right.
and I've covered the Capitol for years. What he is talking about cutting is the rate of increase. And my question to you is, without cutting the projected rate of increase, not the real number, the projected rate of increase after a huge stimulus, 300% increase in some of these programs, how do you balance the budget without cutting some of these entitlement programs in the rate of increase, not services?
I'm not talking about other entitlement programs. I'm talking about Medicaid. That, I think, is the critical issue. And I encourage every serious Catholic voter to think hard about those kinds of cuts, because those kinds of cuts that are going to impact the elderly and are going to impact, I think, the unborn are cuts that we need to be really concerned about.
It'll be much worse if the government defaults and those programs cease to exist. We won't even be talking about cutting. We'll be talking about defunct programs. We won't be able to meet the obligations.
I'm utterly confident that the government is not going to default. I'm sure that both the Republicans and the Democrats, when they stare into the abyss long enough, are finally going to get together and make the compromises necessary to avert
We have
that.
lots of questions for you. I want to play one other bite. This is really about how Catholics should vote in this electoral season. I spoke to Archbishop Lurie of Baltimore recently. Here's what he had to say. I'd like your reaction.
We should recognize which of those issues involve intrinsic evil. For example, abortion. For example, denying fundamental rights like religious liberty. And we should vote for no candidate that promotes, as part of the platform or as part of his own or her own positions, intrinsic evils, even if that means not voting.
Your thoughts?
I have to say I really love Archbishop Lurie. He confirmed my daughter. He's one of my favorite prelates. As I understand faithful citizenship, what we have to look at is the big picture. That is, we have to think about the abortion rate, about the number of unborn deaths. And when I look at the Romney-Ryan proposal, specifically as it relates to Medicaid, if we want to make it a little bit broader than that, we can think about the cuts to public housing, to WIC, to on and on. When I think about that and its likely impact on the abortion rate, as well as its impact on other pro-life issues, I think that we have to weigh that. And
but how do you square that? How do you square that with the Bart Stupak at your event this past week in Charlotte? He said, and I quote, "I'm perplexed and disappointed that having negotiated the executive order with the president directly, not only does the HHS mandate violate the executive order, but it violates statutory law. I think it's illegal." And he's concerned because the government and the Obama administration are mandating that employers provide contraceptives, abortion-causing drugs, and sterilizations to their employees. Doesn't that outweigh being an intrinsic evil? All these other minutiae budgetary issues to you.
Raymond, I completely support my own university's lawsuit in this regard, and so I share with you those concerns about certain aspects of the contraception mandate. But the larger package of the Affordable Care Act is something I actually endorse. I think that it creates a kind of medical safety net that's going to be very helpful. as I said before, Romney Care in Massachusetts has had a really positive impact on the abortion rates there. The Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, is a lot like Romney Care. And my hope is in the coming years, with the rollout of the Affordable Care Act, we're going to see nationwide the kind of results that we're already seeing in Massachusetts.
I want to share some emails with you. This comes from Chad. He writes, how can you as a Catholic support a candidate who supports and advocates for intentionally evil acts, abortion, embryonic stem cell research, and same-sex marriage?
Actually, President Obama is not advocating those. He's allowing their legality. I don't mean to, dance on the head of a pin here. But in fact, I think, of course, we have to always in politics engage in a certain prudence in selecting the lesser of evils. And as I indicated, looking at the cuts that Romney and Ryan are proposing, that thinking as a pro-life voter, that strikes me as the greater evil.
Someone writes, is it immoral to keep adding to the national debt and continue making promises the government cannot fulfill? We've been doing that now for, well, I guess it started, right after 9/11. We've been, started this crazy process of driving it up. No, of course we need to do something about, but cutting, the benefits to the poorest of Americans, cutting actually the grants that go to organizations like Catholic Charities to address the needs of the poorest Americans is not the way to balance the budget. The way to balance the budget is to make cuts in other areas or to look for new sources of revenue. I think that's the fair, honestly, that's the just way to balance the budget. We need to, apply Catholic principles of justice when we're thinking about these things. Well, and people are asking, how can you support someone who's actually attacking the church, the HHS mandate? One correspondent writes.
I guess I reject that out of hand. I don't see the Obama administration as trying to attack the church.
You don't?
I think they're a little bit.
I mean, it's politically stupid to engage that battle, wasn't it? Vice President Biden, as well as Daley, the chief of staff at the time, advocated against this precisely because of the backlash. Why do it except to placate a part of the party, Planned Parenthood and others, who are crucial to the re-election bid?
Yeah. I don't think that was it. Honestly, once again, I think that what we're looking at here is the stupidity of politics and the fact that things happen. I mean, it's like watching sausage being made when you see policies being, concocted here in Washington. And as a result, sometimes you get good sausage, but sometimes you get really lousy sausage. And what we got here, I think, is lousy sausage. So this isn't something that I want to defend. I certainly don't want to defend where they came down in that regard. But the larger picture of the Affordable Care Act is something that I do want to defend. I mean, I think that actually is extraordinary policy that
the bishops have long advocated universal health care and the access to health care for everyone.
Right.
The means in which you go
Since
about
1919,
doing it is different.
Yeah.
And people can have disagreements on that.
Of course, right.
The question is the downside of this, the conscience clauses that aren't present in this health care plan, the way it trumps the religious liberty and practice on the local level of hospitals, schools, Catholic employers. That's a big concern, certainly for this audience.
And of course, Raymond, and it's my concern too. I mean, in defense of the administration, they have, after they realize their stupid blunder, they have, in a series of accommodations, tried to take it back. And remember, we still have about a year or so to work all of this out. And my gut feeling and my feeling from working, with some of the members of the administration on this is that before this year is out, we're going to get resolution in regards to the protection of all religious institutions, from the HHS contraception mandate.
Okay. I want to talk for a moment. You are a board member of Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good.
I am, yes.
Which one of the founders of that is now an employee of Kathleen Sebelius at HHS. You were a member of a group, Catholics for Sebelius, when she was denied communion at the time. Any qualms about that now, given her stewardship of this HHS mandate?
As you probably know from looking through my record, Raymond, I've actually called for Secretary Sebelius to step down following the blunders that she made in this particular policy. So yes, this is, I'm proud to say that I no longer support Secretary Sebelius in this position. But that doesn't in any way undercut my support for the Affordable Care Act itself. nor does it impact my support for President Obama.
Okay, so we'll see what happens on Election Day.
Really delightful.
Dr. Schneck,
really
thank you for
it.
being
Thank
here.
You,
and when we return, earlier this summer, he made national headlines defending Congressman Paul Ryan's Catholicity when his budget proposals were criticized. Bishop Robert Morlino joins us for the first time since Ryan became a candidate for vice president. When the World Over Live continues. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over Live. The church has become a part of the political season here in the United States. As never before, the U.S. bishops are battling for religious liberty. Cardinal Timothy Dolan put in prayerful appearances at both the Republican and Democratic conventions. And Catholic social teaching is being debated on a national level. Not so bad. Should the church insert itself into these public arenas? And if so, how should she make herself heard? My next guest is the Bishop of Madison, Wisconsin. Earlier this year, he defended a member of his own flock, Republican vice presidential candidate Paul Ryan. Please welcome back to the program Bishop Robert Morlino.
Great to see you
again. Let's start with forming a Catholic conscience. You wrote a piece recently talking about this,
yes,
and that there were crucial foundational issues that Catholics need to think about as they go to the polling place. What are they?
First of all, one has to look for the presence of intrinsic evil in what either candidate promotes. Mm-hmm. If either candidate is promoting intrinsic evil, then one cannot vote for that candidate, mm-hmm, unless both are promoting intrinsic evil. Mm-hmm. And in that case, then one has to go looking for what would be the lesser evil. Mm-hmm. But if we're trying to balance intrinsic evil with something that is not intrinsic evil, it can't be done. Mm-hmm. Because that balancing act would mean that the balancer would have to discover some greater good that justifies the intrinsic evil. Mm. And by definition, intrinsic evil can never be justified. Mm. Or one would have to find some greater evil than the intrinsic evil that needs to be avoided. And that can't be done either.
So if somebody, for instance, it would be supporting euthanasia, yes, and they say, well, you can vote for them because they have a great environmental policy, that doesn't balance it out. There's not tit for tat here.
No, the intrinsic evils take priority, and they're to be avoided. If both candidates permit or allow or promote intrinsic evils, mm-hmm, then one must look for the lesser evil.
Run through the foundational issues, the top 4 or 5 that people have to keep in the forefront of their minds as they go. What are the deal breakers?
Abortion, as you said, euthanasia, embryonic stem cell research, religious liberty, and the definition of marriage.
Mm-hmm. You also mentioned the right to private property in your piece.
And I would say that, but the right of private property is a particularly complex discussion, mm-hmm, which, perhaps for another time.
Is down the line.
But once we get in, we could get into it now, but then we wouldn't talk about anything else.
No, let's talk
But
about
once we get into it, it requires a more prolonged discussion, mm-hmm, because the right to private property is not absolute, and how that works itself out, mm-hmm, needs to be talked about in a particular context and so on.
I want to play a little soundbite from you. This is Sister Simone Campbell. She is the head of Network, which is a left-of-center lobbying organization here in Washington. She brought up your diocesan native, mm-hmm, son, Paul Ryan, and his budget. Listen and react, please.
Paul Ryan claims this budget reflects the principles of our shared faith. But the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops stated that the Ryan budget failed a basic moral test because it would harm families living in poverty. We agree with our bishops, and that's why we went on the road.
Bishop Morlino, how binding is that critique of the Ryan budget? And when Sister Simone Campbell says our bishops, did all the bishops condemn and critique this budget?
No. What happened was a committee of bishops entrusted with domestic policy came to their own prudential judgment about this particular matter and offered it for public reflection. And that's what they should do, and that's fine. And what they articulated is certainly worthy of respect and consideration. But the American bishops bind only when every last bishop is in agreement. Then we bind. Or if the Holy Father recognizes something that we've done by a majority vote, then that becomes binding because of his recognition. But unless the bishops unanimously are presented with something and respond, then there is no binding force. And as a matter of fact, it was in the press and in the blogosphere that Archbishop Naumann, Bishop Boyer, Archbishop Vigneron expressed certain hesitancy
about that critique,
about this, and about seeming to push too hard for one prudential judgment over another where intrinsic evil is not involved.
So the budget matters are really prudential judgments. This is not something that is dogmatic, like abortion is always intrinsically evil, euthanasia is always intrinsically evil. Cutting the rate of increase or cutting a particular program might or might not be.
They're prudential matters, and they are matters for competent laymen who understand their lay mission in the church to determine. It is not for me to pass approval or disapproval on Paul Ryan's budget. The other point is, and I've said this many times, what is a budget? A budget is a hypothesis. And a budget has to go through both houses of Congress. This budget is being talked about as if, were Romney to win, that budget would go into effect almost immediately.
Right, that budget's defunct, though. He's not even Paul Ryan isn't suggesting
right, he's
that anymore.
Updated. But the point is that, you know, what it will look like after it goes through the sausage grinder of both houses.
In this sausage grinder behind us here.
Yes, both houses of Congress and so on, may be somewhat substantially different from what we've got right now. So we're talking about using a hypothesis to draw a conclusion that Paul Ryan and Mitt Romney don't care. And that's a big jump. That's a big jump.
And so the reason you wrote your article and sort of came to his defense was not to defend the budget, but to defend the man you know.
Not to defend the budget, not to endorse the candidate, but to defend the character and the good name of a very fine Catholic gentleman in the estimation of almost everyone. So, you know, some are taking exception, but...
Some emails have come in and people are suggesting, is it appropriate for the bishops to wade into these areas of prudential judgment and pass what sounds to the laity like an official pronouncement of the church on matters that are everything from investment advice to nuclear warhead gases?
Well, bishops are different, and bishops have different answers to the question, how can I best pastor the portion of the vineyard that the Lord has entrusted to me? How can I do that the best? Should I give an example of what I think a good prudential judgment would be? But if a bishop were to do that, I presume that he would do that with consultation from the lay mission people who have expertise in all of this, and then maybe with that kind of enlightenment go forward saying, for example, this is a good prudential judgment, but at the same time not ruling out any other. And that's very important.
I want to
but I want to insist that You know, lay mission has to be taken seriously. And it belongs to the laity, and the lay people do not need the bishop's permission to do authentic lay ministry. You know, one of the movements forward of Vatican II, one of the real movements forward, is we used to talk about lay apostolate as the participation of the laity in the apostolate of the hierarchy. Well, now, since Vatican II, we see the call to holiness, the seriousness of lay mission in the church, and that when lay people take it upon themselves to form themselves, both in terms of prayer and in terms of information, to make these prudential judgments, that is their mission. And they don't need my permission to do it. And as a matter of fact, when they do it, I'm enriched by it, because then I can say, I am not called to be a political pundit of sorts. I do not endorse candidates. I articulate principles.
Yeah, nor are you a budget maven or anything
now
else.
let these good people who have the expertise, who have the prayer life, who have the faith, let them take this on. And with these kinds of issues, people of goodwill can disagree.
Let's talk for a moment about Cardinal Timothy Dolan, the president of your conference, the Archbishop of New York. He is pronouncing prayers not only at the Democratic convention, but at the Republican convention. He caught a lot of flack when the Republicans invited him and he hadn't yet been invited by the Democrats. Since that time, since he accepted both sides, that seems to have died down. Yet Sister Simone Campbell, we saw, presented herself, she was a speaker at one party's convention. As a religious, is that an appropriate place for a religious to be, not to be offering prayer, but to be offering a partisan statement in the name of the church, or quasi in the name of the church?
Well, again, I would say this. Religious women are technically laity, but we don't look to them to exercise lay mission in the sense that we look to you to do it, or Paul Ryan, because their consecrated life means that above all, they want to witness to the holiness of the church and the holiness of our Blessed Mother. That's what their call is. And to engage in a way that would prompt people on the blogosphere to call her a star. For instance, at the Democratic convention, seems far from appropriate for what we would expect from someone who lives the consecrated life. I'm trying to be as gentle as possible. I have a feeling that Mother Angelica might put it otherwise. But
well, I'm sure she would. But you are being gentle, and that's nice.
But I want to be gentle because I want to be respectful. But I read, as a matter of fact, at least what claims to be the talk that Sister Simone is giving, probably as we speak, or around this time tonight. And basically, she enumerates situations of tragedy which she sees as destined to overwhelm people so that they will be abandoned if the Paul Ryan budget were ever enacted. And I have to say again that one cannot reason somehow that because Paul Ryan puts forth this kind of a prudential judgment that he doesn't care about these people. The stories she tells are powerful and they're poignant.
These are people she met on her bus tour. I'm going to play a little clip. This is her wrap-up, and I want you to react to this.
They're powerful, they're poignant, and they need to be told. I'm all for those stories. But to conclude from someone's budget proposal that they don't care about this. And the other presumption that troubles me is that many sisters I know, if they're faced with these kind of cases, say, what kind of help can I get from these people for these people from Catholic Social Services, or from the Knights of Columbus, or from St. Vincent de Paul.
They look to Catholic entities for relief, charitable entities.
Seems to presume that if the government doesn't do it, they're abandoned. And that's really not a very good statement about the charitable works of the church, which are so manifest. So I differ with Sister's approach. I differ with her implied conclusions. And I differ with her presence in such a circumstance as a consecrated religious whose main job is to witness to the holiness of the church. I have a feeling that she would say to me that there's no better way for her to witness to the holiness of the church.
Listen to this.
Then we'd have to begin that.
She explains herself here. Listen to this, and what do you say to this?
We all share responsibility to ensure that this vital health care reform law is properly implemented and that all governors expand Medicaid coverage so no more Margarets die from lack of care. This is part of my pro-life stance and the right thing to do.
So she's saying maintaining this health care plan in place is part of her pro-life stance. Is that enough?
No, that simply is not enough, because the health care plan is objectionable not only because of mandating contraception and covering abortion, but also because there is, on the Democratic side, there's not enough being done for immigration, nor has there been at all, really. And we have a lot of the other issue that Catholics have to decide is, could the country really go broke? Is it possible? And I think many people, many citizens do not believe that the country can go broke. And I don't know how they would justify that, except by a kind of a fideism. I just refuse to believe that the country
But when you reach the point, as we are now, where more than 50% of households are on public assistance of some sort, you're not far off from that point.
No. And if we take seriously the possibility that everything would be cut off if we default, well then, what greater evil is there than that in terms of non-intrinsic evils?
One quick question before we go. We only have a minute. Are you worried that we have a polarization between pro-life Catholics and pro-social justice Catholics, and the chasm is widening?
Yes, I'm very worried about it, and I'm afraid that this particular election seasoning is deepening that profoundly, so that the election season itself becomes a pastoral problem. As some people said, well, you know, should bishops or should the faith enter into the realm of politics? My question is, why does politics so often take command of the sphere of faith? And why are political considerations more basic in a believer than faith considerations? They should never be.
Very good. Bishop Robert Morlino, thank you as always
Great.
for
Good
your
to be
candor,
with you,
and you're welcome back anytime.
Great.
Before we go, our invitation to the Obama campaign still stands. We look forward to interviewing the president and the vice president at some point before the election. That's all the time we have. The show continues on Facebook and Twitter. Go to RaymondArroyo.com. The Twitter and Facebook pages are linked on the left-hand side of the site. Like me on Facebook or follow me on Twitter at Raymond Arroyo. I will post Bishop Morlino's letters. The last two columns he wrote, they're worth reading. Let me know what you thought of tonight's interview. And next week, I have an exclusive interview with Cardinal Sean O'Malley of Boston. He'll be here on set, so be sure to tune in. Until then, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, I'm Raymond Arroyo. We'll see you next time. Bye now.